This is a partial documentation of a trip that Christine and I took from Reno to Denver in September 2016. Our adventure began as we awaited the arrival of the Zephyr, which, according to my Amtrak app, was on time. While we were standing on the platform, I noticed a man whom I suggested to Christine was our hoghead. That's railroad talk for engineer. So I walked over and asked him, and indeed he was. Train's crew changes in Reno having come from Emeryville. Guessing Ron and his crew were on until Elko. And this is the California Zephyr, arriving a few minutes ahead of schedule. We were met at our car by our attendant, Johnny, who informed us that he'd made our dinner reservations for 5:30 if that was all right with us. That was all right with us. He stored our bags and escorted us to our roomette. I'll have more on that later. Since Saul Bass was unavailable, Jamie Brennan, Christine, and I shot the title sequence adjacent to Oxbow Nature Study Area, which is only about a mile from our home. We shot it 2 or 3 weeks before the actual trip. The eager young lad he is, Jamie agreed to lie down on the tracks for the under-train shots. Isn't she pretty? She sat down next to me. I don't know who she is. We took the short walk to the dining car not long after passing through Lovelock. Our steaks were delicious and cooked perfectly to order. A few minutes ahead of schedule, our first stop was in Winnemucca. During our stop in Elko, Johnny made up our beds as Christine and I stretched our legs on the platform. Again, we arrived ahead of schedule. Our beds were comfortable. Christine slept like the proverbial log in the top bunk since I was fresh out of surgery, and I dozed intermittently in the bottom, which was about what I was expecting. Breakfast was more than acceptable, which we ate while Johnny remade our roomette before a brief stop in Green River, Utah. Call me crazy, but that butte sure looks like a steam locomotive to me. And unfortunately, by the time we were done with our breakfast, all of the seats in the observation car had been gobbled up. But the attendant in the lounge car let us hang out there until we got to Grand Junction, Colorado, where we were able to take our pick of seats in the observation car. The morning before we left Reno, Windows 10 suddenly wouldn't accept my password, and therefore I couldn't use it at all. I'd planned on uploading the SD card from the GoPro camera to the laptop, which would allow me to shoot as much of the trip as I'd wanted. So my frustration with going all out with that title sequence, and I had plans to shoot a few time-lapse sequences and just let the cam roll all the time we were in the Rockies, just wasn't going to happen. I'd only taken the clip of the train arriving in Reno on my handheld, and from my phone I took a couple of selfies and that 20-second clip shot east of Mustang, Nevada. So it wasn't until we left Grand Junction that I started using the GoPro. By the way, the video from on board the train, except for the one that pans to Christine, were shot using Fred Lesore's GoPro camera. This is the same camera we suctioned to various places on the wings, tail section, and fuselage of a glider that Fred and Tom Bjork piloted to several records back in 2013. Lunch was acceptable and came in time for us to enjoy before stretching our legs on the platform at Glenwood Springs. All of the meals were far better than airline food, on a par with chain restaurants like Chili's, Applebee's, or something along those lines. Now, this shot, I hope, should give you a good idea of what the roomette looks like. It's far from huge. It's only 3.5 feet wide, 6.5 feet long. The right tip of Christine's pillow on the empty seat is right next to the open sliding door. If you look out into the hall, you can see the doorway to the roomette on the opposite side of the train. But we never felt cramped or claustrophobic. In fact, we were quite comfortable. Our original plan was to stake our claim to a pair of seats in the observation car for the duration of the trip through the Rockies, but our compartment was so comfortable and the window was so large that we remained there for the remainder of the trip. Our passage, the roomette, and all of our meals, including desserts, were included in our fare, which was only $422. That's about equivalent for many one-way flights for two between Reno and Denver. Now, I did find fares for the exact same trip 2 days later priced at $600 and 3 weeks later priced at over $700. We departed Reno on Saturday of Labor Day weekend. I'm not sure how Amtrak structures their fares. Your experience may vary. A few days before we left Reno, out of curiosity, I checked to see if any roommates were still available on our train. The fare was around $600. I've always wanted to get a compartment on a train, so this was sort of a bucket list thing, as much as I hate cliches, especially trendish cliches. But yeah, it was a bucket list thing. I've always loved trains. My maternal grandfather was a conductor for Southern Pacific, so you could say trains are in my DNA. There's another cliche for you. When I was just a kid, I rode with Grandpa in the caboose between Indio and Los Angeles, California. I was also on the board of trustees for the Northern Nevada Railway Foundation. We were the nonprofit that raised money to reconstruct Nevada's famous Virginia and Truckee Railroad. We also got off the train briefly in Fraser for another stretch, but that ended up being a mistake. I wanted to suction the GoPro to the back window of the train so I could shoot the mouth of Moffett Tunnel, getting smaller and smaller as we entered, and the eastern portal appear as we exited, but I wasn't the only one with that idea, so I had to settle for using these pics I found on the internet. Moffett Tunnel is just under 6.25 miles long. The highest elevation reached by the California Zephyr is inside the tunnel at 9,239 feet. By the way, there are over 40 tunnels of various lengths, from feet to miles, between Grand Junction and Denver. While editing this video, many of those tunnels became convenient places for video redactions. Winds right here can be so strong. These old hopper cars were placed here intentionally, welded on adjacent rails and filled with soil to act as windbreaks. Nature's kind of helped that along. This is about the time that we headed to the dining car for our last meal on the Zephyr. Not wanting to do steak 2 nights in a row, we both got the night special, meatloaf, which was so-so. Part of dining on board the train is sharing a table with people you probably don't know. For our last dinner, we were seated with a really nice couple, Bob and Tammy, who were coming home from Denver from a weekend getaway in Glenwood Springs. And we were all still eating when we arrived early yet again at Denver's Union Station. I let the GoPro run in our roomette while we ate, hoping the battery would last until we reached the station. It didn't. I think it came up about 15 minutes short. As we got off the train and said goodbye to Johnny, Tammy and Bob were waiting right outside to offer us a ride to our hotel. They delivered us to the Hyatt Regency, and we said goodbye to our new friends. We booked a mountain view room on the 33rd floor, which afforded a nice view of the city, especially at night. The next morning, while it was still dark, we walked the 5 or 9 blocks back to Union Station to catch the light rail to Denver International and the beginning of the end of our brief rail adventure. So would I do it again? Well, maybe not a whirlwind quick escape and back, but I'd certainly do another overnighter on the train. In fact, Christine and I are already discussing destinations.